Hi everybody, this is Angel Arts, and today I wanted to start a brand new vlog series about a topic that I have been extremely passionate about ever since I was, even a little kid. Something that I have been passionate about even more so than video games, even more so than gaming, tabletop gaming, and that's becoming a daddy, becoming a father. Ever since I was a kid, I knew that I wanted to eventually have kids of my own and eventually become a dad. And obviously now that I'm much older and married, it's definitely something that I've been trying with my husband Colin to make a reality. But there definitely has been a lot of struggles. We've had, a good number of successes, but there's been an extremely large amount of difficulties and challenges that we've faced all throughout. Colin and I, we got married on the 4th of July of 2015, and we knew that we wanted to have kids. Like when we were on our first date, even though that's normally not one of the things you're supposed to be talking about on a first date, but for us it worked out. We talked about, the desire to eventually have children, not necessarily with each other at the time, but that was definitely something that was very important to us. And we were so bad about it that, we started picking out names for our future kids well before we even got engaged, and just talking about the prospect of having kids. And so it's been about 3.5 years since we got married, and we started the process of trying to have children virtually immediately right after we got married back in 2015, because we knew it was going to be a long and arduous process. Now, I actually had recorded another vlog about a year ago, which sort of summarized the first 2.5 years-ish of challenges that we had trying to have kids as a gay couple. And I'd like to say that it was smooth sailing since then, and we haven't had any challenges or run into any hitches since then, but that is far from the truth. The challenges that we faced for the first 2.5 years was just the beginning. And we're not completely out of the woods yet, but I just wanted to give you guys an update. And I think that this vlog hopefully will be helpful to a lot of you, those of you who, even if you're not interested in necessarily having kids yourselves, maybe it'll help give you guys a little bit better understanding if you're curious on what exactly goes into trying to have kids, especially as a gay couple, and give you a little bit more of awareness out there of still how really challenging and really difficult it can be. And if you are looking into having kids, whether you're adopting or going through surrogacy as a couple who can't, either because you are a gay couple or even if you're a straight couple who just are having trouble, as many couples have, having children without some help, maybe this would be helpful to you guys too. So the last time I made a vlog about this topic, I first talked about how the majority of the first 2 years of our journey was about trying to find some equality and equitability on insurance coverage for gay couples who are trying to have children, and how really complicated that topic is, because it's not it's not as simple as being able to say, oh, this is or isn't discrimination. It's not really, it's a very complicated issue, and it's not a cut and dry thing that I think is going to be easy to find answers for, admittedly. Obviously, as someone like myself who is in the LGBT community, I hoped that there would be something that would make this process a lot easier for us. But I do understand what the complications are, and I do realize why it's not ridiculously a simple thing to be able to get around. So again, I go into that in much more detail in my previous vlog if you'd like to, you know, listen to that a little bit more, just to understand what exactly we've been trying to do for the first 2 years or so. But in addition to that, at the time, we had finally found a surrogate, a wonderful woman by the name of Melina, and we were going through the process of her being able to work together to bring new life into this world. But unfortunately, a few months after I had created the vlog, it was determined that Melina, unfortunately, was not able to be a viable candidate due to medical reasons. And for her privacy, I'm obviously not going to get into any detail about that, but that was a huge, devastating blow for Colin and I, because it took a long time for us to find her, and having to start again from scratch was just very difficult for us. And there was the fear that if we weren't able to find anyone through our friends and family, because that's how we found Melina, sort of by chance from friends and family, then we would be forced to have to find somebody through an agency. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. I'm so glad that that service is available, obviously, for people. But going through an agency is very expensive, and it increases what it already is an extremely expensive, project. It adds an additional amount. So we're talking, if you were to have to try to find somebody through an agency, there are agency fees that you have to pay for. Then there's the obvious compensation fees that you would have to pay the surrogate, and normally that compensation would probably be significantly higher than if you were to find somebody through a friend or a family. You could probably work out a compensation that's a little bit more negotiable. Whereas, if you're meeting someone who's a complete stranger, understandably so, they have the right and ability to, ask for a much higher compensation package. And in addition to all of those fees, you also have to pay for, other things like pay for all of the screenings, pay for the medical screenings, pay for the background checks, pay for the psychological screenings, and those are not cheap either. Pay for insurance. There are a lot of insurances that sometimes explicitly do not cover the medical bills for pregnancy, for surrogacy specifically, and that can be very tricky. So finding the right insurance is really important. Fortunately, with all the flack that Obamacare has gotten in the past, one thing that I really like and that has been beneficial about Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, is that most, I think, if not all, I could be wrong, but I think most of the insurance policies that they offer do cover pregnancies through surrogacy. So for us, that's fantastic for us. And then on top of all of those fees that I've already talked about, you may have to pay a certain amount of money up front into what's called an escrow fund. And what an escrow fund is it's a third party who basically takes a large sum of your cash, of the intended parent's cash, and whenever the surrogate needs some expense paid during the journey through surrogacy, whether it's like paying for medications, paying for maternity clothes, paying for whatever it is, whatever expenses, you know, that need to be paid for, her insurance, for example, it'll come out of that escrow fund, and this third party is able to, like, you know, manage everything so that, you know, she doesn't have to come directly to us to ask for this money. She just comes to the escrow fund, and they, like, make sure that, you know, the surrogate's expense request is legit, that they're not, you know, saying, oh, you know, I wanted to stay home and, you know, have a take-home steak and shrimp feast at my house, and I want the escrow fund to pay for that. You know, they may not necessarily be able to do that. So it helps to take the money portion out of the equation so that the surrogate and intended parents don't have to, like, directly deal with that with each other. There's a third party who handles that, because depending on the surrogate and the intended parents, talking about money can definitely be a very, like, challenging or touchy subject. So that's why they do that. So what I'm trying to say is, going the surrogacy agent route, you're talking like adding another 30, 50 or something more grand, $30,000 to $50,000 more that you have to come up with in order to gain the benefits of it. So that's why when we lost Melina, it was very debilitating. You know, I felt like I was in a very cathartic state, because, like, I don't know what, like, if we're gonna find someone. I don't know if we're gonna be able to pay for this. It was just a horrible feeling, because this is what I want to do. Like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like, there are certain things in life that you imagine yourself when you're on your deathbed. If I am lucky enough to live to a ripe old age, to be on a deathbed, where if you were to look back on your life, you know, would there be anything that you regret not being able to do? And I know for a fact that if I were in my deathbed and I looked back and never had kids, never became a father, I know I would regret that. That would be something that I think would be a determining factor of whether or not I felt like I lived a fulfilling life, that I did what ultimately I really wanted to do with my life. This is what I believe. You know, once I have a child, I truly believe that is when my life actually begins. So the news of us possibly not having that opportunity was just devastating. So several months passed, and we continued searching. I sent out an email, you know, a non-pressure email, just giving people an update of what was happening, and if anyone knew of anyone who had considered or thought about possibly being a surrogate, which is a lot to ask, but, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, the worst thing that could happen is people would say no or ignore the email, which isn't, again, like, that's like not the end of the world. So long story, I don't want to say long story short, long story not as long, there ended up being 3 candidates, not all at once, but over the course of another, like, 6 months, we had 3 candidates who expressed interest, but for one reason or another, those candidates, again, eventually ended up not working out, mostly because of medical reasons. And so we essentially had gone through 4 surrogate candidates and ended up still having to go back to square one. So that's when Kyle and I realized, okay, we can't avoid it. We've sort of exhausted trying to find somebody through friends and family. We have to go through a surrogate agency if we want to do this. And so Colin ended up taking an additional job. He's a teacher, a middle school teacher that teaches Monday through Friday, but he took an additional job where he teaches classes on Saturdays, which means Sunday is his only day of a week, his only weekend day. And he works for like 7 or 8 hours on Saturdays for like 6 hours or 7 hours or so. And so he really, like, I have to give it to Colin for really being he's my hero, trying to earn the extra money that we need so that we can afford the extra amount to help us, be able to go through an agency. And we did end up finding an agency. And the way that it works is that they will, of course, collect your profile information, and they will ask you questions about what you're looking for in a surrogate, because a huge part of this process is trying to find someone who's a very good fit. It's almost like dating, like going through an online dating, because, it's very important that the two are compatible with each other, because this is a big deal, and you are partners through this whole process. And so they showed us a few candidates, and that's the exciting part, right? That's the really fun part, like going through all the candidates, and they give you the profiles of the candidates, like what all their health record information and all that good stuff. And they only give you one surrogate candidate at a time for you to review. And if you want to try to move forward with that person, then you'll move to the next stage. Otherwise, you'll let the agency know, could you please send me another one. So they'll put that candidate back into the queue again and then pull you out another one until you find someone that you're happy with. And then once you find someone that you want to move forward with, they will set up a 3-way phone call with us intended parents, plus the agency representative, plus the surrogate, for us to start talking to each other and asking each other's questions, so that we can start hearing each other's voices, feeling each other's vibe. And then after the phone conversation, both sides, both the intended parents and the surrogate, will let the surrogate agency know either A, that person seemed nice, but I think, we'd like to continue searching more. Or B, no, I really like the other person. I thought they were great. I feel really comfortable with them. Let's move forward. And if both people, say, hey, yeah, let's move forward with this, we like each other. If both of them say that yes, then that's a match. So again, it's a lot like online dating in a way. So we went through a few candidates, and eventually we found a wonderful, amazing young lady by the name of Kate. And she, as soon as we started talking to her, we absolutely loved her. She is such a precious human being, so selfless. One of the things that she said was the reason why she wanted to do this in the first place is not because of money. And after talking to her, I genuinely believe that she's not doing this for the money. But one of the reasons why she wanted to do this was because her parents, she was actually raised by 2 lesbian women. And I thought that was incredible. And she said that when she saw our profile, because the surrogate gets to see the profile before the phone call, she said that she actually called up her mom and said that she called her mom in tears, saying, "It's 2 interracial gay men. This is the dream come true." Like, she specifically preferred being a surrogate for a gay couple. She was fine doing it for a straight couple, but that was just her preference. So when she saw that we were a interracial gay couple, I completely forgot the interracial part, you know, until she mentioned it, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right, that's right. She apparently was really, really happy about it, and she's just, you know, she's very communicative. You know, she's one of the other things that she said that really stuck out to me is she said one of the things that she wants or is looking for ideally in a relationship with the intended parents is, I'm sorry, I'm talking really fast because I'm very excited whenever I talk about Kate. She says she'd love to be able to have the type of relationship where she can just text them, you know, randomly and be like, the baby just had its first kick. And I was like, oh, I want that so badly. Yes, I want that so badly. So and that was amazing because, again, depending on the surrogate or the intended parents, some people prefer, you know, limited communication, like only enough communication to get the job done, and mostly because, you know, some of them want their space, some of them want their privacy, and then there are others like me and Colin who would like to have a more deeper relationship, a more deeper friendship, dare I say familial relationship with our surrogate. And so you need, in order for the intended parents and the surrogate to be candidate, they have to be be looking for the same thing. And so we instantly like really hit it off. Like, she definitely is the kind of person who, you know, if it was up to her, she would love to have some sort of like relationship with the child. Doesn't necessarily have to be like right away, like as in a distant aunt. And not every intended parents, you know, would go for that. But me and Colin were like, yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, we have no issues with that. So Kate eventually came to have her medical screening done, and that was, of course, terrifying for us because the last 4, you know, had issues for medical reasons, and so the medical screening was a bit nerve-wracking, but that ended up working out just fine. And we had her meet, I took her to my job so she could meet my coworkers, and she hit it off with them ridiculously fast. Colin took her to meet his friends. We took her to meet his poker friends, and she hit it off with them. And, you know, she talked to Colin's sister. She just fit perfectly into our friends and family. She just fit. It's like she had always been a part of our circle of friends and family from the beginning. And to me, that is like, how could you ask for anything else? So with Kate's medical screening, everything looked great. The only thing was there were 2 things that needed to be done before we could proceed with the actual embryo transfer. Those 2 things were, she needed to have a very minor but common surgical procedure done, and she also needed to take antibiotics for something. So I was more concerned about the minor surgical procedure, but that ended up working out really well without a hitch. And then, you know, she took the antibiotics, and then we were, you know, moving forward with getting a fertility lawyer, because you need to have a fertility lawyer to be able to draft the gestational contract, is what they call. And what the gestational contract is, it pretty much like, you know, lays out every single term, every single case, you know, so that both sides, both the intended parents and the surrogate, are on the same page. Before they begin the process, everybody knows what is expected, even when some catastrophe happens. Like, what happens if both myself and Colin, God forbid, die before the baby is born? Who's going to take care of the baby? What happens if, God forbid, our surrogate ends up in a coma, you know, and is on life support? What happens if whatever, you know, So, and it specifies, expectations on both sides. An obvious expectation, which at the time I was like, oh, like that is kind of obvious, but I never really like thought about that being in an official document, but it makes sense. Like, the surrogate has to agree that they're not going to have sexual relations during, leading up to the process. And I'm like, yeah, that makes perfect sense why that would be in a contract. So, things like that. It was a really interesting learning process, because you really, there's just stuff that you don't even think about that the contract addresses. So we were doing all that. And in the meantime, we had chosen a donor, an egg donor, because we're not using Kate's eggs. We're not using the gestational carrier's eggs. And I think like most people do it this way, because I think it's highly recommended, because, having a third party, having their egg be the donor egg is a little bit easier on everybody. It's a little bit easier on us, and it's a lot easier, I can imagine, on the surrogate, since it's not their biological child. They're just carrying the child. I shouldn't say just carrying the child. It's not just carrying the child, but you know what I mean. So that's another like service that our clinic was able to provide, and that was also really fun, because again, it's almost like, picking and choosing the DNA. You are picking and choosing the DNA of your child, because again, they give you the profile. They don't give any names, but they show you pictures of each of the egg donors. They show you some of the egg donors' children, so you can get an idea of what your kids might look like based on their children. Of course, they show medical histories, not only of themselves, but like all of their relatives, siblings, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles. It's all there. And like, questions about their lifestyle, questions about, like, are they big into sports? Like, were they like valedictorian of whatever? Were they first chair violinist in their orchestra? Like things like that, what their hobbies are, what their interests are, and things like that, because for many intended parents, those kind of things matter to them. And so, what is their GPA, and like stuff like that. What is their occupation? So it was really, really cool going through all of the egg donor profiles and trying to pick somebody that we really were interested in. And so again, we found one that we really loved, and she not only had a great profile. She's like a lawyer, and I think she had a son, and she's like a very independent kind of person, which we liked a lot, but also very maternal amongst her friends. So there were a lot of things that Colin and I really liked. Colin especially appreciated that she was also pretty sporty, because Colin's very much into like sports and being active and stuff. And so the other reason why we thought she'd be a great candidate is because in the past, when her eggs are harvested, for the cycle to be fertilized, she was currently at the time the highest producer of donor eggs for intended parents. And since Colin and I are doing what we call we're going to do dual insemination, and that means half of the eggs would be fertilized by me, half of the eggs would be fertilized by him. It was highly recommended to us for our clinic to have as many eggs as possible, because we're basically splitting the eggs in half with him, half with me. And the plan is, I personally don't care if any of my children are biologically mine. I really do not care whatsoever. Colin, however, understandably so, would prefer to have at least one child biologically his, and totally understand that. So because of that, the agreement was the first child would be Colin's, because he cares more about having a biological child. So let's start with his, and I'm perfectly happy with that. So before that egg donor got to us, her record of the number of eggs that she produced for a cycle for a couple is 45, I think, or something along those lines. I think it was 45. which is nuts good, because I think 20 is already a very high number for the amount of eggs harvested for an IVF cycle. So, going in when her record was 45 was vastly incredible. So she got to us, and when she got to us, they were able to harvest from her 62 eggs. 62. I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like, it just the body is such a beautiful thing. Like, and the female body in particular, even as a gay man, the female body is such a beautiful thing. Because I didn't know this until like later in life, but you're born as a girl, you are born already with thousands and thousands of eggs. This is where things get really, really sad. And I asked Colin specifically permission to talk about this, so hopefully you guys will just bear with me. So we were going to start with Colin's, like I said. And so the way this works is that you have to wait for the embryos to reach a certain stage. You have to wait after the eggs are fertilized. They have to reach what's called the blastocyst phase. And then when it reaches the blastocyst phase, they extract a cell or a few cells out of it for analysis, for genetic testing, so that they're able to find out right away whether or not the embryo is normal or abnormal. They can detect things pretty early, even at that stage, like Down syndrome, because they can see the number of chromosomes. And they also are able to figure out grades for the embryos. They give 2 grades, like an AA or AB or CB or CA or whatever, 2 different grades that basically tells you what the success rate is. How likely is it for this embryo to turn into a successful pregnancy? And that is what will help us determine which embryo to start with, because obviously you'll want to start with the highest grade as possible so you have the highest success during the embryo transfer. Embryo transfer mean when you're actually transferring the embryo into the surrogate. And trying to get it in the first time is obviously what you want, not only for emotional reasons, but also because you have to, depending on what your fertility center's program is, you do have to pay every single time you try. So if it doesn't work the first time, which is not uncommon at all, it is very common for people to try multiple times before they finally get pregnant, and you have to pay for every single try. So like I said, they after the eggs are fertilized, they have to wait till it reaches a certain stage before they can freeze them for the actual IVF transfer itself. So they fertilized their eggs with my sperm sample, but then when they got to Colin's sperm sample, normally a sperm sample would have thousands and thousands and thousands of sperm. With Colin's sperm sample, they were only able to find 28 total viable sperm, which is very different from thousands and thousands and thousands. And so they said that what they would do is they would try their very best to fertilize as many eggs as possible with that 28 sperm. And it was, again, very, very tragic news for Colin to hear that. And we were just hoping, praying that we would be able to get, some very viable embryos out of Colin's sample. So after the first day, only 8 out of the 28 fertilized eggs survived. then after that, the next day, only 2 of the fertilized eggs survived. And then after that, only 1 survived, which is better than none, but 1, just 1. And I can imagine, obviously, what Colin is feeling like, but I know for a fact that I can't fully grasp that. But I can, partially imagine how debilitating that is and how devastating it is. Like, Colin really had a very hard time with that, and I don't blame him, because so many, at the end of the day, he knows. At the end of the day, he knows that it won't matter. When we finally have that child in our arms and he's holding it, he knows it's not going to matter. But in that moment, he's allowed to be devastated. He's allowed to be upset, and he's allowed to mourn the possibility that he may not have his own biological kids. Now, there was a little bit of a ray of light, because the next day, the clinic told us that the 1 embryo of the 2 that they thought didn't make it actually finally was a late bloomer, I guess, and finally continued to the next stage. So he was back to 2. And so those 2, they took the cells out for genetic testing to find out what the grades would be. And, AB or BA is very, very good, and AA is amazing good. So, that's what we were hoping for. Is okay, we're down to 2. I'm hoping that these are very good, highly grade embryos that we can use. And so they got to the testing, and then we waited for weeks. It was a very arduous weeks to wait for the results of the quality of the embryos. And then we finally came. My embryos, the number that ended up surviving was 21, I think. I ended up with 21. And out of those 21, 2 were abnormal, but 19 were normal. And then and I had a whole bunch of ABs, and I had 1 AA, which is fantastic. It's phenomenal. It's amazing. But again, the plan was not to start with mine. The plan was to start with Colin's. So what were Colin's? Colin had 1 abnormal and 1 normal. And the 1 normal was a CC. And a CC is a very, very low grade. So low that our clinic has never done a transfer on a CC grade embryo, simply because it's not cost effective, because the likelihood of a CC coming to term to a full pregnancy is very low. If I remember correctly, 15% or something like that, that it just isn't, for most couples, it isn't financially viable, unless that's all you have, unless that's all the embryos you have available, considering that we have ABs and AAs, but again, those are mine, not Colin's. Colin was devastated. Again, it was a nightmare for him, and I was trying to be as supportive as possible, but it's hard to be in that position to be supportive, because here I am sitting on my amazing ABs and AAs, and he's got his 1 CC, and obviously he was appreciative of it, but it's just I wish deep in my heart that the situation was reversed, because that would have been perfect, because I wouldn't have cared. It's if my samples were not jamming, if I ended up with all CCs or 1 CC or none, I couldn't care less, really. But that's not how it worked out. So that's the irony. If the roles were reversed, if the situation was reversed, it would have just been perfectly fine. But it just so happens that that's just not the way it works. And some of you may be asking, well, can you try again with another sample without getting into Colin's medical privacy more than I already have, because I don't want to delve even more. That is just not an option, unfortunately. It's not really a viable, it's not a financially sound option, let me just put it that way, to be able to try again with another of Colin's sample. So again, I'm sorry for being vague, but again, I need to keep Colin's privacy respect his privacy as much as possible. So Colin has come to terms with it since then. You know, it took some time, but he eventually, again, he knows it doesn't matter once the baby is born. He knows that, but he needed time to mourn, because he was crestfallen, and there were just a lot of things that, you know, just the idea of him personally not being able to continue his familial genetic line, his biological line, was very tough. So then after that, we finally had a date set up. We started to move forward. We finally got an embryo transfer date. We were so excited. The embryo transfer date was supposed to be this past Wednesday, December 12th. And something came up. So, and that something is, Kate had gone to see her gynecologist just to check up, just to double check to make sure that the antibiotics that she had taken, if you guys remember, had actually worked. And the results of the antibiotics checkup was positive, as in the antibiotics did not work, as in what needed to be cleared up by the antibiotics had not gotten cleared up. So we had to pause everything. You know, I was so excited. We were so excited. We're like, yes, we have a transfer on the board. But then this came up, because something always comes up. And unfortunately with these, I don't know if I have time to give every single thing that came up over the last 3.5 years. I'm not going to. But there's been a lot. But this just happened to be that thing that came up at the time. And so we had to pause what was our moving forward until we could get this cleared up. So we thought, okay, fine, we'll just get a different set of antibiotics. It'll be great, and the antibiotics will work fine. So Kate gets the antibiotics on a Friday night. She starts taking them. The next morning, on a Saturday, I get a text from her letting me know that, unfortunately, she woke up at like 5 a.m. in the morning, throwing up, vomiting. She had terrible diarrhea. And I'm thinking, oh man, like, I don't know what to say to her, because, you know, everything that I've read, everything you read about antibiotics tells you really, really, really should finish your antibiotics once you start. It's really bad to stop your antibiotics and not complete them, because it'll make whatever you're trying to get rid of, it'll make it stronger or immune to antibiotics, and it might come back worse than ever before. But at the same time, this is something that she needed to take like 4 times a day for like 10 days, and this is only day 1, and not even day 1. So I'm like, okay, if that's how she reacted to it after taking like a pill or 2, and she has to take 4 a day for 10 days, like, I don't know what to tell her. And, you know, it's a weekend, so it was very hard for her to get in contact with her doctor to ask her doctor questions. So I was like, I don't know what to do. Fortunately, God bless Colin's sister, who is a nurse. And not only is she a nurse, she's a nurse at a hospital in New York. And in the birthing ward. Like, she's the nurse that helps deliver the babies, which, you know, probably is probably the happiest wing of the hospital. So she gets to be there. But anyway, she was there amongst other doctors and nurses, And she, of course, had more knowledge than I did. So Colin's sister, whose name is KT contacted Kate. And again, they hit it off. Those two, they're like total BFFs. They hit it off like nobody's business. She went to talk to Kate and got everything figured out, and had help from the doctors. Anything that KT didn't know the answer to, there were doctors there at her work available to help answer her questions, to find a possible other antibiotic. So she told Kate, you know, let's discontinue, stop taking the antibiotics. And she assured me this was fine, this was okay. Like, if the antibiotics, it's one thing if, you know, you start having these side effects halfway into taking your antibiotics, and as long as those side effects are not like really serious, but this is like really early on. If you're reacting to the antibiotics this badly that early, it's probably a good idea to stop the antibiotics and then start new ones. So that's what they did. She stopped her antibiotics, and then come Monday, she talked to her doctor again. They prescribed her with a third antibiotic. So of course, Colin and I are on pins and needles because we're like worried sick. What if this doesn't work? What if this, you know, what if Kate ends up, you know, not being able to be a viable candidate medically again, our fifth surrogate again. And then we'd have to start this process all over again from square one, not only losing, you know, time, you know, because we had started with Kate. By this point, we were with Kate through this process for like several months, 6 months, basically. And even before that, it took like 3 months for us to find her in the first place. So that's like 9 months total. You know, not only would it be time, but also money too, because we had already paid for the lawyer fees. We already paid for all of our screenings. We already paid for, there was so much things we already paid for, and that we would have to like cut as a loss and start over from scratch and just lose precious money and time. And Kate also was very afraid too, because her heart was set on doing this. She wanted very much to be able to do this, and she was like horrified. Like, what if eventually the antibiotics never work? What if we just keep trying and trying and trying and nothing works? Like, so it was like we were on pins and needles. I was so debilitating and so stressful. And again, this is just the stressful thing of that month. Like, there were other things, other disasters that happened throughout these last 3.5 years. So, but that was just the stress of the month. So the good news is, eventually, the third antibiotics did work, and Kate was clear. And then, at that point, everything like would able to continue smoothly now. So now we start getting the point, and now that that cleared up, I felt more confident to start these vlogs, because I didn't want to start the vlogs unless I felt that there was some possible light at the end of the tunnel, some possible light, because oh my gosh, like the stress, it's just so stressful. I can't tell you how emotionally draining and exhausting this is. And we haven't even started on the transfer yet. So it's so hard, guys, it really is. But we're pushing through, we are enduring. And as of this week, Kate's schedule for the transfer started. So the way the schedule works is the doctor figures out a day-to-day schedule of all these medications that Kate has to take. Like, on this day you start taking these pills, then on this day you take this many pills and you start taking this injection, then on this day you stop taking these pills and you stop doing this injection, but now you take these pills and do these injections. And they're all supposed to be doing certain things. Like, the first thing that is happening, she's taking medication that's supposed to shut down her ovaries, so the ovaries don't start releasing eggs. Then she stops taking birth control, because it might sound weird, why is she taking birth control when she's she's trying to get pregnant. Well, you know, leading up to the schedule, she is supposed to take birth control so that her period cycle is predictable, you know, so they can like monitor it a lot easily. So I think today is her last day, according to her, that she's supposed to be taking birth control. So she's stopping her birth control today and then continuing on with the medications, the meds that are supposed to, you know, shut down temporarily her ovaries. And then like she's going to go in to get her blood work and her sonogram and then start taking medication specifically to prepare her uterus, to get the uterus lining thick so that we can do the embryo transfer. And so come pretty much after New Year's, right after New Year's, she's gonna come in, fly in to see our doctor, and they're going to do one final check just to see how her uterus lining, if it's thick enough, if the uterine walls are thick enough based on her response from the medicine, from the medication. And if her uterine walls are ready and thick enough, then 5 or 6 days later is the actual embryo transfer. And so once the transfer occurs, it's going to be such a relief, because at least now, after 3.5 years, we get to the point where we can actually like try to get pregnant. You know, we will be, you know, for straight couples, just because an egg gets fertilized, it doesn't mean it's going to turn to a successful pregnancy, you know, because there's always the possibility of miscarriages, obviously, and things like that. But those are the kind of like emotional roller coasters, emotional worrying that the vast majority of people, the normal people, get to worry about. We haven't even gotten to that point. It takes us 3.5 years to get to the point where we have the privilege of worrying about whether or not it'll take or not, whether or not something will result in a pregnancy. So I am grateful for those of you who are not in my situation, who actually want to have children and has not had to go through all of these hoops, jump through all of these hoops and drop all of this extra money and time just to have the privilege of having children. This is why it makes me so upset whenever I find parents who just take for granted, you know, the gift that they have, like the ability to have kids if they wanted to. And for people who just abandon their children, leaving infants in dumpsters, like that is, for someone like me who has had such a hard time reaching this point to try to have kids, and there are people out there who would do that. It's just, I just don't understand. Like, I can't imagine like this gift of life that so many people take for granted. I just don't get it. So yeah, we're not in the neck of the woods yet. There's still a lot of hurdles to jump through, but at least it's hurdles that normal couples, or majority of the couples, go through in this process. Once a transfer happens, we have to wait 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, Kate will go in for a checkup, and that is when they will be able to confirm whether or not there is a actual pregnancy that succeeded 2 weeks later. And even after those 2 weeks, you know, we have to continue monitoring it, because there's still a danger of miscarriage after that. But those 2 weeks are very critical. And if it's confirmed that there isn't a pregnancy after 2 weeks, then we'll just try again and hope that it works eventually. So that's where we're at right now. I know it's a lot, and I tried to give you as an abbreviated update as possible, because it's been a year. There's been a year of stuff that's been happening, and for your sake, I'm not giving you every single detail of what this entire year has brought, but I at least wanted to give you an idea and just give you an awareness of what this whole thing entails, and just how appreciative I am of modern science, of giving us this opportunity, and how grateful I am to everyone in the process up this point. Not just Kate, but also our agency and our fertility doctors and all of our friends and family, and you guys watching, all of you viewers who've been so supportive to Colin and I, because I've been talking about having kids on my channel for years, and you guys have been really great. Thank you again for all of you who supported us on our GoFundMe, because that was a huge help to us, to help us reach this point, because we would not be here if it wasn't for the GoFundMe contributions that you guys have been able to provide us or aid us, or at least sharing our GoFundMe account to have this become a reality. So this is the first of the daddy vlog. I'm hoping that at the end of this vlog is a celebration. I'm hoping, praying that this vlog will continue on and have a happy ending / happy beginning. It's not a happy ending. It wouldn't be a happy ending. It would be a happy beginning, let's say. So just keep praying, keep sending happy thoughts, good thoughts, positive vibes. Keep your fingers crossed, keep your toes crossed. Whatever of the above applies to you, whatever of those applies to you, thoughts, prayers, good lucks, anything, support, whatever, we would greatly appreciate it, because we're still not out of we're still not out of the woods. There's still a lot of things we need to get past before this is through and done. And I just thank you guys for listening to our story. I hope to continue giving you guys an update on our journey, both good and bad. Hopefully more good than bad. And if you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments and I'll try to answer your questions. If not in the comments, but maybe in a future vlog. Because I'm sure this whole process is probably really interesting for some of you, and I'm sure many of you are probably curious about a lot of things. We definitely were super curious and had tons of questions. I've learned so much more of the woman's vagina as a gay man. I've learned so much more about a woman's vagina than I ever thought I would as a gay man. So, and I think that's really cool. I think that's really neat. The gift of life is just, I'm in awe. I am such in awe. If it was possible for modern medicine to allow men to be pregnant, and I know that modern medicine is currently working on that, I definitely would do it in a heartbeat. I would do it in a heartbeat if I could. I seriously would, and vlog the whole thing. But, I don't think I'm going to see that anytime soon, that Colin and I can benefit from that. So thank you guys for watching, and until next time, love yourselves and love each other.